unmute myself. Okay, I think we're working now. So one time I forgot to unmute myself, so that's where we're going. So once again, thank you so much for attending this webinar. We're going to be talking about how to avoid going broke in the nursing home, because as we'll find out, if you don't do anything, if we don't plan, the likelihood is that the nursing home is going to wipe you out. So as I said, there was, you know, the little chat box, or, you know, you can hold the questions to the end. But I mean, what's the risk of us going into the nursing home? I know nobody wants to go into a nursing home. I've never had anybody come into my office and say, I can't wait 6 years, 4 months and 3 days and 22 minutes. I'm going to a nursing home. But the problem is that, as my wife says, I'm a pessimist. So sometimes I think I'm a trained pessimist. So we have to, you know, plan for everything, because basically what they're saying is about 70% over the age of 65 are going to require some type of long-term care during their lifetime. And also 20% of today's 65-year-olds will need care for more than 5 years. Now, the older that you get, obviously, you know, the percentages increase. It used to be way back 50s, 60s, 70s, you know, we lived to our, 72, 73, you know, we retired, had a few years of retirement, then passed away. But now we're living well into our 80s, 90s, and, you know, a lot of people are moving into the hundreds. So obviously, the older we get, the more care that we need. So also, what's the risk? You know, a lot of people are ending up getting dementia. You know, most prevalent one is Alzheimer's, but there's various types of dementia, and you know, we just don't know when we have it. You know, because it can start 20 years before it actually comes out. So I could have it today. You know, is it just more than, you know, where I put my keys or where did I park the car? But you know, as we go down the roads, then it can lead to, you know, significant memory loss, can't do the activities of daily living, and then sometimes it gets to a point that you can't stay at home and you've got to go to an assisted living facility or a nursing home, or, you know, even with your children. What we found is nearly half of all long-term care claim dollars through Medicaid is due to dementia. So it's a major, major problem. Now, I'm going to talk about a whole bunch of myths, you know, and these are the types of myths that, you know, when people come into our office, you know, we have to, you know, debunk the myths. Some of the myths, you know, that people are coming in saying you know, it's illegal. I can't give any money away. I've got to give everything to the nursing home. Well, that's not correct. It's not like you walk into a nursing home and you know, you've got $500,000 there and you have to write the check for $500,000 to the nursing home. As we'll explain later on, there is ways to protect that asset. Also, the biggest myth is that, you know, so if I'm married and my wife goes into the nursing home, I'm going to lose my home. Well, that's a myth. There's ways of protecting your home. And then, you know, the other myths is, you know, saying that we'll lose everything. I must spend all my assets on the nursing home. There's just nothing I can do. But that's wrong. There is things that you can do. And we're going to be talking what we call our crisis plan and our pre-crisis plan as well. But you do not have to give everything to the nursing home. The other myth is that Medicare will pay for long-term care. Medicare does not pay for long-term care in the nursing home. And what I'm talking about that is that if you're in the nursing home for 2 or 3 years, Medicare is not going to pay for that. Medicare is only going to pay for what we call rehabilitation. So if you end up going into a hospital for 2 to 3 days, then you end up going into a nursing home for rehabilitation because you've broken a hip or, you know, broken a shoulder or whatever. Medicare will pay 100% for the first 20 days. Now, after the 20th day, 21 to 100, Medicare will pay approximately 80%. The other 20% will come out of pocket unless you have what we call supplemental insurance, Blue Cross, Blue Shields, those type of, as we're getting bombarded right at this moment in time with the Medicare supplemental plans. And if you have that, then the supplemental plan, Medicare plan will pick up the difference. But once you get to 100 days, Medicare will stop. And if you're still in the nursing home, then you're on private pay. And then basically you're paying, $12,000 to $15,000 a month. Now, the other thing is that you're not guaranteed all of those 100 days. So let's say after 45 days, my wife, who's in, for rehab, stops doing physical therapy, speech therapy, or whatever, Medicare will stop. So if you're not following doctor's orders, Medicare will stop, and so will the supplemental insurance. So after the 35th day, my wife doesn't want to do anything. Next day, she's on private pay. And then we're paying, $15,000, $12,000 a month, or sometimes even more, depends where we go. As we just talked about, that supplemental insurance, or sometimes we call it Medigap insurance, does not cover long-term care, doesn't cover custodial care in the nursing home. All it will do is supplement the difference between what Medicare pays and your out-of-pocket expenses, usually the 20%. A lot of people think that the Medigap supplemental insurance will cover the cost of the nursing home, and that is not the case. A lot of times that we have people thinking that, if I go to the nursing home, the care is not as going to be good under Medicaid as it is in private pay. Well, you get the same treatment whether you're on Medicaid or you're on private pay, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. It's the law. The nursing homes cannot differentiate between you as a Medicaid patient and someone as a private pay patient. It's like, my analogy is like a Stephen King movie, that you're driving up to the Medicaid and you open the door and it's squeaking, and it's dark and dingy and there's no one there and the lights are flickering. So that's the Medicaid side, but you go to the other side and it's the private ward is bright, there's lots of people there and everything like that. That's not the case. Once again, it's against the law to differentiate someone on Medicaid as it is on private pay. So the big myth, as we talked about, was I must give everything to the nursing home. And as I've said, with proper planning, you can utilize medical assistance. If you see the word medical assistance, that's what we call Medicaid in Maryland. So Medicaid in Maryland is called medical assistance, just to confuse everybody. So with proper plannings, we can utilize Medicaid/medical assistance and save your assets. So what's your exposure for most people? So the average stay in a nursing home is 4 years. And let's say the average cost of the nursing home here is about $12,000 a month. So 4 years times 12 months times $12,000 a year is over $500,000. So for most people that I see, if you end up going into a nursing home and you don't do any planning, pre-planning or crisis planning, it's going to wipe you out. So you've worked hard all throughout your life, scrimping and saving and avoiding holidays and doing all of this because what you wanted to do was leave a legacy for your children or grandchildren or waiting for the rainy day. Well, unfortunately, the rainy day has come and gone and you've spent all your money on the nursing home. And as we will see, all your money basically, once it's gone, your income, your Social Security and pensions go to the nursing home, except for a whopping $83. So you're allowed to keep $83. Now, what the heck can you do with $83? It won't even cover the cost of basic cable. So that's why we need to protect your assets for you, your spouse, and your family. because it's all to do with your quality of life. As we said, one of the big myths is we can't give money away. We hear this, well, there's something about this 5-year look back period, and we didn't give our assets away more than 5 years ago, so there's nothing that we can do. Well, we heard from our sisters, brothers, boyfriends, mother, that there was nothing that could be done, and she lost all her money, and we couldn't give all the money away. Yes, you can. You can give away your assets. You can gift your assets. It's not illegal. I like you guys, but I'm not going to go to jail for you. You just need to do it properly. We need to do what we call proper asset protection planning. So as we said, you can safely transfer assets with proper planning. Now, one of the big things that we need to do this is up-to-date financial power of attorneys. Sometimes we call them durable power of attorney. So if you hear the word durable power of attorney, it's a financial power of attorney. If you do not have these power of attorneys, and also, there's the healthcare power of attorney, you need to get them. To me, these are the most important documents that you can have, because we're dealing with you while you're still alive. Now, you can have wills and trusts and, all those type of estate planning products, but that's basically dealing with you once you're gone, once you're no longer here on this earth. I'm more interested in you while you're still here. So you definitely need that financial power of attorney, durable power of attorney. Why? Well, it allows us to plan, and it allows us to make gifts. Now, so if you have an existing financial power of attorney, I want you to review it to see how old it is, and also to see whether you have what we call a gifting clause. There should be a clause in there that allows you, through your agent, to gift money away. We need that clause to protect your assets. So it's very, very important, because if you're out of it due to dementia or incompetency, then your agent, your power of attorney, can do this for you, but we've got to have those clauses. So that's very, very important. The other point is asset protection planning. Is, as we talked about, there's two types that we look at. One is crisis, that we'll probably spend a bit of time on today, and also is what we call pre-crisis. So we're planning to avoid the crisis. I can't tell you how many people come into our office and they say, whether it's a spouse or a son, daughter, and they're saying, my mom or dad or loved one is in the nursing home. They're going through rehab, but the likelihood of them coming out of rehab is small to none. What do we do? And then, and that's when we're in the crisis. Well, do you have financial power of attorneys? No. Have you done any planning? No. And then we're scurrying around trying to, come up with a plan to save those assets, which we can do. The pre-crisis is, well, let's assume, that I'm 72, 68, or even, late 70s, early 80s. And then, we're in good health. Nobody knows what's going to happen to us. Maybe there's one or two people know, but, I certainly don't know what's going to happen. But if we're in good health, then we can start doing certain types of trusts. So we can put some assets into these trusts. And then after the 5 years, when you put those assets into that trust, that money or asset, usually the home, is protected from the nursing home. So that's part of our asset protection planning, is our pre-crisis planning, setting up what we call an irrevocable trust. So we can move, as I said, we can move assets into that trust. We get through the 5 years, and then whatever in that trust after the 5 years is protected from the nursing home. So that's what we do with our pre-crisis planning. So the other myth is I can transfer certain assets to avoid Medicaid. Well, a lot of people come in and say, you know what, I want to transfer my home over to my child. I want to give my child $100,000. Now, the problem is if we do that, we're talking about a 5-year look back. So when you're applying for Medicaid, Medicaid people go back 5 years to see what you've done with your assets. So let's say that you've given your children $100,000, to pay off credit card debts, help them with their mortgage, pay for your grandchild's education. So sometimes, if you're making those gifts that Medicaid, or say they're gifts, that's going to cause problems for your Medicaid. So let's say that you qualify for Medicaid, they look back 5 years and they see that this $100,000 is being spent on your children, not on you. They take that $100,000 and divide it by approximately $10,000, which they say is the average cost of a nursing home. It's just an arbitrary number by the state of Maryland. So 100,000 divided by 10 is 10. And that means that you don't get Medicaid for 10 months. Now you have no money. So how are you going to pay the nursing home? Well, you remember we're talking about this power of attorney. What happens if your son or loved one, signed the nursing home contract and they signed as the guarantor? Well, the nursing home is going to go after that person because they guaranteed that money. So 10 months times 12 grand, that's $120,000 that your child, loved one, or whomever may get sued for. But if they had signed as a financial power of attorney, they're working as you as your agent and they would be off the hook. So the nursing home can't sue them. Now, the other thing is then, people say, well, I'm going to add my kid's name to the deed, my checking account or whatever. And then, Medicaid can't get at it. Well, that is a myth. That is a myth. Because if your name's still on it, then you have access to that. Or if you transfer it outright, let's say I transfer, my home to my son. Well, what happens if he files for bankruptcy? What's going to happen to my home? What happens if he gets divorced? All of a sudden, my daughter-in-law that I like, maybe I don't like her anymore because she's going to get some of that money. What happens if he goes into foreclosure, or God forbid he's driving on 270 and in an accident and there's a lawsuit and they put liens against that home? Or what happens if he dies and he leaves it to my daughter-in-law? I like my daughter-in-law, but I still want my home. Then maybe she could kick me out of the house. So what we want to do is, I do not want to transfer all of my assets to my children because I just can't trust them. Okay, maybe you can, but sometimes things happen out of your control. So that's why we prefer to put them into trusts, because you still have a certain control over them. So, we don't want to give our assets outright to our children. So if you're asking to yourself, what are potential nursing home assets? Basically everything that you have. Whether it's cash in a cookie jar, your checking account, savings account, CDs, stocks, bonds, real and rental property. A lot of times sometimes we have clients that come in and they have what we call a revocable trust and say, well, I've got a revocable trust or a living trust that's going to protect my assets. It does not. The only thing a revocable trust does is avoid probate. Because the way Medicaid looks at it is if you can get your hands on it, so can they. And with a revocable trust, you can get your hands on those assets. So can the nursing home and so can Medicaid. That's where we have to do what we call the irrevocable trust. and put assets into that irrevocable trust. Like everything in life, there's advantages and disadvantages. The disadvantage to you for putting, your assets into that irrevocable trust is technically you can't get at them. However, since you can't get at them, neither can the nursing home. Okay, so you don't put everything into the irrevocable trust. For most of our clientele, we might be putting in some monies, and usually the real property, your home, because at least we can try and protect something from it. As I've said, joint accounts or joint assets doesn't, you can't say, well, I've got 50 grand, but it's in the same name as my son and me, so Medicaid can't get at it. Yes, they can, because that's my assets. That's where they look at. If you've got any life insurance, specifically whole life insurance, whole life is that, if I die, my beneficiaries get $50,000 to do with X, Y, and Z. However, if I cash it out, I get $15,000. Medicaid will count that $15,000 in a whole life policy. Now, they won't count your whole life policy if it's less than $1,500. But if you've got life insurance for $1,500 or less than, I don't know what you're going to pay for. Now, term life insurance has no value to Medicaid, because the term life is only when you get that money. If I've got a $50,000 term policy, my beneficiaries only get that when I die. So there's no value to that when I'm walking into the nursing home. Also, any retirement accounts. So if you've got any IRAs, Roths, 401ks. So as we talked about, say my wife is going into the nursing home or is in the nursing home, and I have a $50,000 IRA. That's just in my name. Now I'm going to argue, hey, well, that's my money. I worked hard for that. It's not part of her money. Well, Medicaid disagrees with me. So in Maryland, whether it's in my name, my spouse's name, or joint, it's all pulled together. So and we'll talk about how to protect those assets as well. Also, if you have vehicles. Now, if my wife's in the nursing home, I'm allowed to keep one vehicle because they want me to be able to drive up and down to the nursing home and take care of my wife. That's the way I look at it. But if I have another vehicle, my wife has a vehicle and I have a vehicle, that other vehicle is what we call accountable asset. And also, as we can say, a home. Now, if I'm what we call the community spouse, I'm still living at home, and my wife is in the nursing home, I can protect that home. However, if I am single and I own a home and I go into the nursing home, that home is technically not protected. Now, what do I mean by that? So let's say that I'm in the nursing home, I have no money left, and I apply for Medicaid. So I get Medicaid. Now, Medicaid can't force me to sell the home. However, what they're going to do is they're going to put liens against the home for the amount that Medicaid expends. So let's say that I'm in there for a couple of years, and that's $250,000 that Medicaid expends on me. Now, let's say I have a house worth $350,000. Well, Medicaid will take, put liens against that and take $250,000 out of that. And then if there's $100,000 left or whatever, then that's going to go to my beneficiaries. Now, if it's a $350,000 lien in a $250,000 house, the state's just going to take that $250,000 house. So that's the potential nursing home assets. Basically, everything. So we were talking about exempt assets for a single person. Okay, so I'm single, my wife has passed away, and God forbid I have to go into a nursing home. So we're sort of talking about the crisis plan now. Okay, so I haven't done any planning, I didn't do any irrevocable trusts. I wasn't thinking about this because there was no way that I was in any way that I was going to go to a nursing home. I was just, my expectation was I was just I'm 87. I'm just going to go to sleep one night and that's it. Unfortunately, my plan wasn't someone else's plan, and I'm ended up going into the nursing home. So what if I don't do any planning? What do I retain? Well, to get Medicaid, there's really three components. One is you got to be sick, or you can't, so you need some type of skilled care, or you can't do 2 to 3 activities of daily living: bathing, dressing, going to the bathroom, those type of activities of daily living. So, we can tick that box. The other one is to get Medicaid, I've got to be in the nursing home. Well, I'm in the nursing home. Why I'm in the nursing home is because I'm sick. So we tick those couple of boxes. Now, to get Medicaid, I have got to have less than $2,500 in assets. That's not my income. My income is basically going to go to the nursing home. But we're talking about checking accounts, CDs, savings, 401ks, whatever I have. If I've got more than $2,500, I won't qualify for Medicaid. So basically, you're totally impoverished. So once you spend down or get rid of those assets below 2,500, I'm in the nursing home, and why I'm in the nursing home is because I'm sick, will qualify for Medicaid. Medicaid / medical assistance will pay for my long-term care, all of my costs, except for my income, my Social Security and or pension. So let's say the nursing home cost, Medicaid cost is 12,000. My Social Security is 2,000. I give that over to the nursing home. Medicaid will then pay the 10 grand. Now, I am allowed to keep what we call limited personal property. So that's whatever I can fit in my nursing home room. Okay. So I might be able to have a ring, engagement ring, a ring, some jewelry. However, I wouldn't really be keeping that stuff in my nursing home room. I might have a TV or a radio, maybe even a chair or a walker. That's it. You know. Also, we're allowed to prepay our funeral because the government doesn't want to have to pay for your funeral. So if you prepay your funeral, but it's got to be a specific type of funeral policy. It's got to be an irrevocable policy. So if you're going to go and prepay your funeral, you just talk to the funeral director and say you're doing this for Medicaid, and they should know what to do because you've got to create what we call an irrevocable contract. So once you hand over the 10 grand to the funeral home, you cannot get it back. Okay. So you're allowed to keep that. That's what we call an exempt asset. And likewise with your burial plot, whether you're getting cremated or you're getting buried. Now, as I said, out of your income, you're allowed to keep $83 per month. So you've got in your checking account, you've got less than $2,500. Your income comes in. Your income then goes out to the nursing home, except for $83. Now, what happens if you need teeth? What happens if you need glasses? What happens if you need hearing aids? Medicare and basically Medicaid doesn't pay for that. Now you've only got $83 a month and $2,000. How are you going to take care of you? What quality of life do you have if you can't see and you can't hear? It's not, so that's why we need to protect your assets for you. As I talked about, all the other assets potentially could go to the nursing home. So let's say you have 100,000, you're going to spend 100,000, 10 months at 10 grand, gone. Now all your assets are gone. You're under 2,500. You're in the nursing home. Why are we in the nursing home? Because we're sick. So we qualify for Medicaid. And what happens if you need glasses or hearing aids or cable or whatever? You get no money to pay for that. So I'm going to give you, an example here. So these are your, for a single person. And once again, I'm talking about the crisis. So this is a crisis planning. So your countable assets are $250,000 home, a $10,000 car, $100,000 in an IRA, $50,000 in a savings account, and $10,000 in a checking account. So if you add all of this up, and hopefully that asset, the total countable assets are $420,000. So once again, whether you've got a home, a car, whatever, that's countable assets at $420,000. As we say, out of that $420,000, you're allowed to keep roughly, well, you can keep less than $2,500. So potential amount of assets to the nursing home in Maryland are $417,500. Because your home, if you don't get rid of it, they're going to put liens against it, and you won't get Medicaid if you get more than $2,500. Because if we look back here, we've got this car, IRA, savings, checking, all that has to get spent down. Because a car is a countable asset as a single person, not for a married couple. As we'll talk about, you're allowed to keep one car for a married couple. So, your home, your cars, your IRAs, your savings, checking accounts, all gone. Set for about $2,000 and $83 a month. So it's a little bit different, exempt assets for a married couple. And once again, we're talking about the crisis. So this is when we're getting a call. Hey, mom and dad, or my loved one's going into the nursing home, today, next month. Or they could already be in the nursing home. That's, we sometimes hear about this, that, that some of our clients have already been in a nursing home, then they come to us and we're trying to protect some assets when they're already in. So there's still things that you can do. I'm going to hark back to this 5-year look back, because people say there's nothing you can do. Yes, there is. Yes, there is. And we're going to talk about it. So exempt assets for a married couple, as we can see, the home, since I'm living in my home, I'm the community spouse, that home is protected. However, because my wife's in the nursing home and I'm living in this community, the community home is protected. Now, as we go down the road, what we want to do is, because most of us, have the home with our husband and wife. So what I want to do is take my wife's name off the home, because down the road, if I sell that home, because I want to downsize or whatever, then I can keep that money. If it's still in both of our names, and let's say we have a $300,000 home, and I don't take my wife's name off of it, then she's entitled to $150,000, and I get $150,000. So all of a sudden, she's got $150,000. So now she's got more than $2,500, and she's kicked off of Medicaid. And then all of a sudden, you have to spend that $150,000 down. As I mentioned, as a married couple, we're allowed to keep one vehicle. You're also allowed to prepay your funeral. And you're also allowed to keep, household goods, china, silverware, the tables, furnishings, etc. And then we're allowed to keep assets, half of the assets, up to $126,000 approximately. So what do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to give you an example of that. So if you get any other assets, more than half or over $126,000, all of those assets then have to go to the nursing home. So I'm going to show you an example here. So once again, this is the married couple example. So husband and wife, they have joint the home, the car, the checking. Husband has an IRA of 150,000. Wife has an IRA of 100,000. So once again, these are countable assets because whatever was the husband's or whatever is the wife's and whatever is joint is all pulled together. So we break out these countable assets or the assets into two functions. One is what we call a non-countable asset, and the other one is what a countable asset that the nursing home can get at. So as we've talked about, then a couple of the non-countable assets are the home, the $250,000 home, because the husband or one of us is still living in there, and they're allowed to keep a car. So those are non-countable. So the nursing home can the home and the car as long as you're married. Oh, wait a minute here. I'm sorry, I had a problem with the internet. So, so these are the countable assets. So once again, even if wife is in the nurse, the husband's IRA is pulled together, so that's 150,000. The wife's IRA is 100,000, and the checking account, the joint checking account, is 50,000. So once again, they're all pulled together. So total countable assets, potential countable assets for the nursing home is $300,000. So what we do is that we take this $300,000 and divide it by 2. So what we're saying is the community spouse gets 150,000, and the institutional spouse, the one who's in the nursing home, gets $150,000. However, the state of Maryland comes in and says, whoa, community spouse, you've got 150,000. That's too much money. You're only allowed to keep up to 126,000. So the remaining, 24,000 then goes over to the institutional spouse. So the institutional spouse now has 150,000 plus the 24, so that's 174,000. So institutional spouse is 174, community spouse is 126. Now, what happens if we had, say, $200,000 in countable assets? So once again, we divide that $200,000 by 2. So the community spouse gets 100, and the institutional spouse gets 100. Okay. Now, you can't go and say, wait a minute here, I want to bring it up from 100 up to 126. That doesn't work. Okay. Everything is divided by 2. So you've got 100, institutional spouse is 100, and they have to spend that down below 2,500. Once again, if you say have $100,000 in countable assets, you divide it by 2, 100 divided by 2, 50,000 and 50,000. That $50,000 has to get spent down. So even though you have a ceiling of 126, all of that money up to 126 doesn't go to the community spouse and then the remainder. So everything is whatever assets you have are divided by 2. And the different, and so once again, if we take that $200,000 example, community spouse gets 100, institutional spouse gets 100, and they have to spend that down. So that's what we're talking about here. So married couple example. The community spouse is allowed to keep up to 126,000. And then now the nursing home spouse is 174,000 because they're taking 24,000 from the community spouse and bringing it over to her 150 plus the 24 is the 174. Now you've got to have a spend down of approximately, $174,000 or whatever to qualify for Medicaid, because your assets then have to be below $2,500. So the community spouse is left with 126, and if you don't do anything, the 174,000 has to get spent down below 2,500. So 17 months or 17 and a half months at 10 grand, boom, all that money is gone. So we have a story of 2 brothers, okay? They were both veterans. The one on the left had a massive heart attack, okay? He was airlifted down to Washington, D.C. They did operations. They was off to the nursing home for rehab, came out of rehab, physical therapy, boom, 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 boom. And how much was out of pocket for him? Basically nothing, because Medicare paid for that, okay? His brother didn't have a massive heart attack. He had dementia. Now, he had home care, assisted living care, nursing home care, and it cost him about, $400,000. And that all came out of his pocket. Now, what's the difference? I'm sorry, I'm getting on my soapbox right at this moment in time. So the guy on the left had a massive heart attack. They spent $400,000 getting him better. However, the brother on the right-hand side, Medicare didn't pay the $400,000. He had to pay the $400,000. Whether that's right or wrong, it's above my pay grade. But so just be careful. If you're going to get ill, be careful what illness that you're going to get. So my goal is, I'm sorry, I'm just checking the time because I don't want to be too long. My goal is to help you and your loved ones. There is ways to protect your assets, whether you're pre-crisis or in a crisis. Okay, there is ways. Remember, we were talking about setting up these irrevocable trusts more than 5 years. Even if you're a single person and you're going in a crisis situation, there is ways to save your assets, whether you're just about to go into the nursing home or you're already in the nursing home. Similarly, if you're a married couple and you have a loved one going into the nursing home tomorrow, next month, already in the nursing home, there is ways to protect those assets. Also, one of our goals, more from our, estate planning side, is to avoid probate. And we do that with, as we mentioned earlier on, with a revocable trust. With a revocable trust, you avoid probate. However, the revocable trust does not protect your assets. That's where you need the irrevocable trust. Once again, that's in our pre-crisis planning. We want to honor your healthcare decisions. How do we do that? Well, that's your medical power of attorney, where you appoint your healthcare agent to make decisions for you. And we also want to try and maintain your quality of life and care. Now, if you're in a nursing home, your quality of life, is not as great as it would be outside. But if you have no money and you've got $83 a month, what quality of life do you have? So that's where we want to try and protect assets for you. So if you need money for glasses, hearing aids, big screen TVs, cable TV, whatever, it is there for you. Likewise, we also want to create a legacy for your family, for your spouse, because all of a sudden you're there with 400,000 and then all that money is spent down to 126,000. We want to be able to protect that money for the spouse or even your loved ones, your family, your grandchildren. Because what we're finding now is, I can't tell you how many people are coming in their 90s and saying, hey, my health is failing, what can I do? And oh, by the way, I've run out of money. And unfortunately, there is nothing you can do because the government, through Medicare or anything else, doesn't provide you any help. The only help you get is if you end up going into a nursing home. But what happens if you're not sick enough to go into a nursing home, but you're sick and you need help and you need home care? Now, home care is about $25-30 an hour. Now all you have is, you've got no more assets and you've got $2,000 Social Security. How are you going to pay for this? So that's why we need to plan. And a lot of times is once we come up with a plan, we get the estate planning documents done, we come up with an asset protection plan. A lot of our clients say that we give them peace of mind, not just for you, but for your loved one and for your family. So what can you do now to plan for the future, to protect your assets, to ensure your quality of life? That's where we're going to go, and we can have an appointment with you. Because that you've been on this seminar or webinar, we give free consultations. It used to be that if people would come into our office, but with this COVID, we're not doing that. We're sort of limiting people coming into the office. So what we can do is set up a conference call with you, and then we'll meet with you over the conference call. You can ask me questions. I'll answer your questions. And then if we're going to go forward, we'll design a plan for your needs, okay? So since you've attended a seminar, webinar, you receive this, I call it an educational credit. It's basically you get a free initial consultation. And a lot of people say, well, what's your fees? And I say, well, I don't know what my fee is going to be because I don't know what work I'm going to do. Is it a simple power of attorney? Is it we're filing for Medicaid? I mean, there's a big range. So what we do is this initial consultation, we'll find out what work we have to do. And then basically what we do is we give you a lump sum price. So if you have to do X, Y, and Z, we'll give you a price for that. We'll give you a fee for that. It's not, we don't charge hourly. So it's not like, well, is this, $500 an hour? Is this 1 hour, 5 hours, or 20 hours? So you'll know your fee before we start, okay? And that's it. So thank you so much, everybody, for listening. I know I went on a little bit longer than I wanted to, but hopefully it was good for you. And what I would like to do is open it up, Kristen, for questions, or was there any questions from the chat?
Yes, there was. We'll start with the first question. They ask, do you have any information on if COVID-19 affects estate planning?
Not really. The COVID-19 affects estate planning. I mean, the big thing would be, with COVID, that you definitely need documents. You definitely need what we call power of attorneys that we talked about. You need the financial power of attorney, and you also need the medical power of attorney. And within that medical power of attorney, there's most people call them living wills, advance directives. So God forbid that you get sick, then someone can make financial decisions and also medical decisions for you while you're still alive, whether that's taking care of you at the home or, God forbid, being in the ICU in the hospital. So yes, from that estate planning, and also, what happens if, if you die, you definitely need some sort of types of trusts or wills. But really, I mean, we haven't, so it's just a matter of setting up those documents. Obviously, if you pass on, and then if you have to go through probate, the probate is still going ongoing. But, the critical documents to me are definitely the power of attorneys. So hopefully I've answered your question.
Yes, you did. And this is Cheryl Johnson.
Oh, hey, Cheryl, how are you?
Oh, much better. Sitting
Right.
here with my husband.
Yes.
But yeah, you did answer. We just got scared, when I couldn't help him and he couldn't help me.
Yes. No, I totally, and that's why it is really, really important to have these documents,
All right, I have a second question, and that is, what are your thoughts on a life estate with powers for the home?
Okay, good question. We can't cover everything, but if you have a life estate on your home, so let me explain what a life estate is. So let's say I changed my deed to saying, hey, my son sort of owns the house. However, I get use and possession of that house until I die. So he can't kick me out, or she can't kick me out. So that's it. Now, there's two, when you do the life estate, it has with powers and without powers. So with powers means that then I still have the ability, to change my mind, to sell the house, do whatever I want to do. So if you end up going into a nursing home, because it's with powers, that home is a countable asset. If it's without powers, that means I can't sell it, then I can't get at it. Okay, so then becomes a non-countable asset. However, what once again is that you're dealing with the 5-year look back, and it just adds complications. For me, I don't really like the life estates, because once again, I'm giving up power to my kid or whatever. That's where I prefer the irrevocable trusts, because I still think we've got a lot more control over that and being in a trust than doing the life estate. So hopefully that answered your question.
All right, and actually there was a second question with that. If you set up an irrevocable trust and you don't have 5 years, will the nursing home take the money?
Well, let's say that you place your home in the irrevocable trust, and God forbid you don't get through the 5 years, you get through 4 years and 6 months, okay? If you're a single person. Now, sometimes then we look at it and say, okay, well, maybe it's worthwhile paying privately for the next 6 months to get over, the 5-year hurdle, okay? And then once you go over the 5 years, then you apply for Medicaid, because then you've protected all of the assets that are in the trust. So it just depends on the cutoff and how much money that you have. If after 2 years that God forbid you end up in a nursing home, we have to go to maybe phase 2, because phase 1 was setting up the trust, but we didn't get through the 5 years. Phase 2 is, well, what do we do? How can we protect the assets? Maybe we move from the pre-crisis plan to a crisis plan. And then the only downfall is that maybe you've spent some money setting up a trust. So is that, hopefully that answered your question. Okay. Any other questions, Kristen?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
go
or
ahead.
anybody. Yeah, on you go.
So this, I'm reading as Cindy Hopkins. I'm Sandy.
Yeah.
Because I'm using a Zoom account. For some reason, it used that instead of mine
That's okay.
when I clicked on the link. So, right, the situation is my parents live in a home, their own home. My mother has dementia and is receiving home care currently.
Mhm.
There's some wills, there's other things. So if I'm thinking about if my father were to set up the irrevocable trust for him for them, and my mother ended up in nursing care in less than 5 years
Right.
outside of the home, would that, how would that play out? Because he's the community spouse. Does that, I know the
Yeah.
assets are joined.
Right. So the way that Medicaid looks is, with the irrevocable trust, if you take any assets and put that into the trust, that they're saying that you've gifted those assets into the trust. So let's say that you have a $300,000 home and you put it into the trust. Then mom goes into the nursing home, and let's just assume there's no other assets. Okay, I know that doesn't make sense, but just for this example. So all they had was a $300,000 home. They put it into the trust, no other assets. So mom goes into the nursing home. Mom would qualify for Medicaid because she's sick. She's in the nursing home, but and also she has no assets. However, they look back that 5 years and see you've placed that $300,000 into the trust. So they divide that $300,000 by approximately 10 grand, and then they would say, "Oh, by the way, mom, you're not going to get Medicaid for 30 months because 300,000 divided by 10 is 300,000." So if it was just the home, let's say we put the home into the trust, and then what we can do is we can take that home back out of the trust and then just give it to dad, and then it's protected. Unless he goes into the nursing home. And then once you get Medicaid, then you can always put it back into the trust again.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean the problem is, with someone, you've got to look, does it make sense? Can we get through this 5 years? Now, obviously, with dementia, it depends on where the dementia is. Is it early stage, mid stage, or late stage? Well, if it's mid to late stage, the likelihood of getting through 5 years is pretty small. So my recommendation probably would not be to do an irrevocable trust. But we never know what's going to happen. We actually had a client who was 97, 98, and he wanted to set up an irrevocable trust. And we had all the family and we were discussing it, and we came to the conclusion that he's probably not going to make the 5 years, so we didn't do it. But he showed us because he went into a nursing home when he was 103, 104. So if we had done an irrevocable trust, that those items would have been protected. But
So what would be the avenue then for less than 5 years of?
yeah, well, then I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I
Yeah,
apologize.
so I think you may have answered this, but
Yeah.
what would be the recourse then for protecting my father's assets?
Yeah, well, that's where we come up with an asset protection plan. How much money does he have? what's in his name, what's in mom's name, and then the property. So we come up with a plan to protect. Usually with like a married couple, if they have a house and save $500,000, we can save it all for the community spouse.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Any more questions? Okay, well, if there's no more questions, thank you so much for.
Oh, I have a question.
Yeah, that's fine.
I put it in the chat, but
okay.
I'm gonna see if I can read it. I was asking if you have Medicare income from a settlement set up to pay for expenses to an injury and you're handling the funds, does the nursing home take that funding if you go in a nursing home? And does that, if you don't go, does that settlement affect your spouse?
Well, if you've got, the way Medicaid looks at it is if you've got any money, that's their money, okay? So let's say someone was God forbid, in a car accident and they get $50,000. They got the settlement, they put it in their checking account. That $50,000 is a accountable asset. So they can go after that money. Okay.
Okay, no matter how you got it.
It doesn't matter how you got it. Yeah. Or if you get like a structured annuity settlement that you're getting $500 a month for the rest of your life, that $500 would go to the nursing home if you're in the nursing home.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. I was trying to unmute so I could pull that up. Glad you were able to get your question in. As of right now, I'm not seeing any others in the chat room.
Okay. Well, once again, thank you very much for listening. If we can help you in any way, please contact us. And once again, I said we've recorded this seminar. So if we've got your email, we will email it to you, and you can listen to it again if you're so inclined, listening to my tones. And also, that we can reach out to you if you would like a free initial consultation. But once again, thank you so much, everybody, and be safe and be well, and happy holidays to everybody. Thank you.